Put your hands together for Fabio, ladies and gentlemen. Come on up, sir. And now he's going to talk about why bad data is holding your marketing back, solutions for marketers and analysts, which I hope all of you are. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. This is a big crowd. Thank you for being here today. My name is Fabio De Bernardi. I'm VP of Business Development at Adverity. And today I have the pleasure to talk to you about data quality. Fundamentally, this is a data quality topic. Now, if you are here to hear about Gen AI and shiny objects and all that, I will disappoint you. I'm talking about some pretty fundamental stuff, sometimes maybe a little boring too, but it will make you successful in your job. So when you're successful, please let me know. I'll be very, very grateful to hear. And the data quality is super important, in my opinion, for marketers more than other parts of the business, because marketing is relatively new to using data at scale to do what you guys do. And therefore, I think there is a different level of maturity perhaps compared to other parts of the organization you work with. And hopefully not very many of you in this room, let's call it, but I'm sure there's somebody here is still struggling with Wanamaker's conundrum. Wanamaker famous for saying that 50% of his budget is wasted. The problem is he doesn't know which half. So hopefully you're not in that position. But when my colleagues speak to prospects, we hear all the time statements like, I'm losing so much time following up on questions about data and our dashboards. People don't trust the data. I have so much data, it's hard to know where to start on ensuring it's accurate, or we need to be able to demonstrate that our data is compliant with our own rules. So as I said, pretty, sometimes dry topics, but these are the foundations of a serious data practice. And we ran a study a little while ago, and the study, well, one of three CMOs surveyed over 1,000 people said that they don't trust the marketing data enough. And even more, like it was 51% of CTOs and chief data officers said that they don't trust the data. So data trust, data quality is an issue. And we'll understand why it is so and how we can fix it. But it's not just Adverity who's doing research on this. There are some better known sources like Forrester saying that the second largest challenge for data challenge faced by marketers today is data quality. The first one, FYI, is setting good KPIs and goals. Harvard Business Review a few years ago said, or coined the rule of 10, the idea that if you're working with bad data, any tasks cost you 10 times more than it should because of this bad data that you start with. Chief Martech, famous for their the huge visuals, they say the data is a differentiation in data models. And I would expand on this saying that, again, a lot of companies, a lot of people talk about Gen AI and the promise of what AI can do. But without good data input, AI is gonna fix that for you. So again, actually, I'm reading a great book now, and one of the quotes from this book is from, I would say, JFK, Kennedy, I think it was. The right time to fix a roof is when the sun is shining, not when it rains. So it's almost like the same idea. If you want to be able to do a lot of great things with Gen AI, make sure that in your company, in your marketing team, you have the right data to feed to these models. And last but definitely not least, Gartner says that poor data quality costs organizations an average of almost $13 million a year. That is a lot of money wasted. And we definitely live in times where wasting time is not really an option. So what do we mean by data quality? I like to see it as almost a health check of how good and reliable and accurate is the data that you work with on a daily basis. And is this data complying with the standards that you set for yourself and for the people in your organization to trust this data? So there are fundamentally 6 pillars that we believe are the most important ones, and I'll take you through before we move on. The first pillar of data quality is accuracy. How usable is your data, and ultimately, how good a reflection of truth and reality is your data. If your data is not accurate, then you cannot really create much. And actually, something that I should have said a couple of slides ago, but I totally forgot, I'm sorry, is that I like to see data and data quality in this, imagine a very simple like X and Y axis with value and risk. If you as an organization work with good quality data, you maximize the potential for value of what you do for the company, what this data can do for the company, and you minimize the risk, right? If you are working with almost no data, because maybe you're not very data driven and you're effectively very much driven by gut instinct and the experience of the people that work in the organization, you're probably somewhere like medium value, definitely not extracting as much value in your decisions as you could. You're also probably medium risk because experience is very important, right? So the third situation is the worst one, and it's bad data. If you have data and that data is bad, you are in the double whammy of super high risk because you don't even know that you're driving the metaphorical car into a ditch, and very little value. So I really encourage everybody to think of, okay, if we have data and we're data driven, is this data driving me to the right places or not? So now back to this slide. Accuracy is the first pillar of data quality. So how accurate is your data? How truthful it is to what that data is representing. And it's followed by completeness. So is there any gap in this data? And the gaps in the data can take multiple forms now, since we are the sort of digital marketing conference. The example I could make here is if you're trying to understand your I don't know, overall investment across all the channels that you invest your marketing budget, do you have all these data sources like feeding into your data warehouse or wherever you store your data? Or are there potentially any gaps? Or potentially, are there any gaps because your whatever process you have of capturing data is not fail-safe, and therefore you don't even realize that some data has not come into your spreadsheet, data warehouse, PowerPoint presentation, whatever you guys use. The third pillar is consistency. How uniform is this data? Can you do the proverbial apple with apple comparison, or you end up with some media spend in dollars, some in euro, that's very difficult to compare, or again, some date formats in the sort of European standard format, some in the American one. So once you have all this data into hopefully like a single source of truth, can you actually do much with this data, or the data is not consistent enough to be analyzed and made to work for you? And then we go to uniqueness. This is pretty straightforward. Like, is there any duplication in data? This is always one of the questions that clients and prospects ask at Adverity. Hey, how do you ensure that data is not duplicated? Because duplication of data is a very mundane mistake that can happen for all sorts of reasons, but also that can really derail very quickly the value of your decision making made on that data. And then we have timeliness. How up-to-date is your data? And I think there are two important elements here. In marketing, and of course, depends whether you're like B2B, B2C, but like in general, marketing data is quite, it's got a very short shelf life. If you don't make the right decision in the right time frame, the opportunity to upsell a client or maybe save a cart abandonment situation is gone. So having the right data at the right time is very important. But also timeliness in the sense that, as I will be talking more about, when you have a complex data pipeline that brings in data from your Google and Meta and TikTok and what have you, and then ultimately needs to be in somebody's hands for analysis, if these processes are not running in the right sequence, you may end up without some of the data. So actually the completeness area comes into play here. An example would be, I don't know, maybe some of your campaigns run in Asia Pacific or like on the West Coast in the US and some in Europe. You want to make sure that you're like collecting the data at the right time so that when you need the data for analysis, everything is kind of like standardized and ready at the right time. And then last but not least, validity. And validity is almost like a catch-all of all the previous pillars. And validity, in my view, has more to do with the data governance that you have as a company. So what are the rules that you set as a company for data to be called qualitatively of a high standard? And so once you can say, yeah, data is not duplicated, data is following all the rules as a business we decided, then your data is valid, and valid data can be used for decision making and can be trusted. Okay, one more second to take pictures if you want. And gone. Right. So how does poor data quality happen? I mean, does it happen? Is it by design? And I don't know, but let's see. So the first one is actually pretty straightforward. Like, a lot of companies still don't measure or even try to understand what's the quality levels of their data, or they don't have very sophisticated data governance mechanisms. So they're simply like not doing it, and therefore they don't know if the data is good or not. And normally what happens is that people once they have a bad experience on the data because, oh, the data told me this, but actually I checked the Facebook interface and Facebook told me that the number of whatever impressions was different, trust is lost. And once you lose trust from the people that work with you, it's very, very difficult to regain. The second element is manual data processes. Again, I've been at Adverity for the best part of a decade now, and at the very beginning I was telling people, hey, if you're still using Excel and PowerPoint, don't get me wrong, I love both of them, but they're not necessarily a robust enough solution to work with data at scale. And now, almost 10 years after, sometimes I'm still involved in those conversations. There is still a lot of like manual data, but also if you think like when you put data into your CRM, that's largely a manual input that is prone to error. A lot of data that don't comes out of like beautiful APIs like Google and Meta and all these big platforms provide, but maybe it's just like a file that a provider sends you on a weekly or monthly basis, and then you need to process that. There is still a lot of manual work involved in what we do as marketers, and with manual work there is the possibility for errors. The third one, and probably one of the most or one of the toughest things to tackle, but we're talking about solutions later, is companies working as very siloed teams and not having great communication between teams. And this in particular with regards to data. At the very beginning I said, I think data quality is particularly important right now for marketers because marketing teams have kind of followed on what maybe other teams within your organization have been doing for longer. And so your finance team probably have completely different tools to work with data than you guys have. And then there is supply chain, if you're that type of company that even has a supply chain team. And then you have HR. So different teams have created their own data silos with their own technologies, with their own needs, with their own naming conventions. And these silos are very difficult to break down. And again, the communication in exchanging data is still pretty primordial in many cases. And then the fourth and last, I could have probably come up with another four, but like the four most important ones, is tool overload. And what I mean by this is the fact that over the years, and also, again, I could talk about this for hours, but let me try and condense it in a minute. Over the years, IT teams in particular, or data teams, have applied to marketing the same approach that they knew from non-marketing data sets. And they created these like highly specialized, oftentimes highly complicated and highly expensive data architectures, where you have tools like Adverity, for example, to bring in the data into this ecosystem. And then you have like several tools to process the data step by step. And at the end, there is an output in a PowerPoint, hopefully not PowerPoint by now, in Power BI, in Tableau, in whatever BI tool you want, or in a Gen AI bot, wherever the output is. But this data architecture over the years has been based on older ways of thinking and has become a very huge and complex and resource-intensive thing to maintain. Now, how do we solve this problem? Now, the problem of not even doing the monitoring is easily solved. There are many tools out there to observe your data, to monitor your data, to be able to tell you whether the data that comes through the system, that the so-called pipeline, is the right data or not. So this is a very simple solution of just finding a technology provider that suits your needs and work with them. The second is actually not a million miles away. So for the manual data processing challenge is easily solved by automating as much as possible. Like your time is definitely better spent than copy-pasting things across Excel sheets, or like doing stuff that machines can automate, and in the process reduce drastically the amount of errors, duplications, etc. that you find in the data. So of all the 6 pillars, I cannot think of any one of those that wouldn't benefit massively from automating as much as possible this data pipeline. And then the problem of siloed teams and poor communication. This is, again, as I said, is tough. Fundamentally need to work to establish cross-functional procedures and processes to work with your colleagues, having data as a very precious asset for you as a company. One thing I like to say is that data is never the responsibility of a single person or a single team. Data is a collective responsibility of an organization. In fact, there will be, again, if we had more time, although I'm going so fast that probably I will have more time for Q&A than I expected. But now, there will be another interesting chart that I didn't put on the slides of a Venn diagram with people, culture, and technology. These are the three elements you really need to have successful data outcomes in a company. And if you have the right people, so the right skills, but not the right culture as a business to use the insights you have, then it's not quite working. If you have the right technology and the right people, but not the right culture, again, you create silos. So all these three areas need to be balanced of people, culture, and technology for you to be a data-driven or an effectively data-driven organization. And these things are very difficult. These changes are difficult. They most of the time need to come from the top, and a lot of companies are going through that process as we speak. And finally, tool overload. So as I said, a lot of tooling and data architectures that I see on a regular basis with clients I work with or prospects are coming from the past, are, again, what used to be the norm in dealing with data. But we think, and actually I think at Adverity, we pioneered this approach for a couple of years now, what we call integrated data platform. And what effectively means is you don't necessarily need to go to 10 different providers and 10 different pieces of technology to do something like we're talking about here, which is, it's complex, but we're not sending anybody to Mars. It's not that complex. So our approach, and we believe that this will become the prevalent approach in the coming years. There's a big education and retraining and readapting task at hand. But we believe that offering more elements of the traditional pipeline, so ingesting the data, transforming, preparing the data, analyzing the quality of the data, enable like a workbench to do analytics, etc., is the way forward. And since I think I have time, I'm going to tell you even a bit more of this. Like when I joined almost a decade ago, we at Adverity, like other companies in our space, we were offering like an end-to-end solution. Dear client, come and buy our dashboards. And then everything else happened behind the scenes. Now that has changed radically to this day, where you can still have our dashboards if you want, but like effectively we created a highly modular platform, so you can go and take as many of these modules as you want, with the idea that if you don't have a strong reason for creating a highly fragmented data architecture, which means having many relationships with many providers, many contract negotiations, many quarterly business reviews, many trainings, many everything, you can achieve the same or arguably better with a simpler solution. But also, it's not just simpler in itself, it's also a more focused solution. We're specialists for the marketing line of business. We inject subject matter expertise in what we do. And this is, I think, what is very important here. And I'm going to close with, probably more time than expected for Q&A. But let's go back to just a quick thought of what I said earlier, this value and risk. If you're working with good data, you maximize the opportunities you have as a team and as a company, and you minimize the risk. When you're working with bad data that you don't even know if you can trust and your colleagues may not trust, you maximize uncertainty. Outcomes could be good, could be bad, you don't know. The risk is through the roof. You cannot function as an organization like that. And on that, thank you very much.
All right, let's give it up, everybody, for Fabio. And now let's go ahead and open it up for questions. So you know the routine, first name and company name. Who's got our first question for Fabio? All right, we have one in the back.
Hi, my name is Ana Maria. I'm from IBM iX agency. And the question would be, what would be the example of good KPI to measure the completeness and quality of your data?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I guess completeness is, you need, in our platform, there's just like a number, tells you how complete it is now. Jokes aside, you need to know where, you need to have a benchmark. Like you need to know what does complete mean to you. But then I think it's very easy to establish if your data is complete or not, in the sense of if every day you're running processes that like bring in data from different sources, not only you should check if all the processes have run, but also we can look at qualitatively or actually quantitatively if data is in line with what we expect. So if every day you pull in, I don't know, 500,000 rows of data, et cetera, then if one day there is like 1,000,000 or only 10 rows of data or whatever the measurement could be, then there's an early warning of something not having worked properly. So I would say like volume of data in general is a good KPI of is my data complete or not. And then again, I'm thinking primarily of marketing data here. That could be something more qualitative, but I think volume of data is the number of data that I'm processing look consistent with what I have seen previously.
Hi, I'm Frank from Giant Benelux, Giant Bicycles. I actually didn't prepare a question, so I'm put here on the spot, but since I'm holding the microphone, I noticed some challenges internally with colleagues that aren't working with data a lot, and like they're far from working with data. How would you say, how can you convince the people around you to also start thinking about data and working more actively with it?
Yeah, thank you. And good question for somebody who didn't have a question until about 20 seconds ago. Now I think the using data for so that we can tick a box and say, oh yes, we're data driven. There's no point in that, right? So the expectation is that when you use data to drive any decision, the outcome will be better. And also, if you have data, you can measure that outcome better. So hopefully the proof will be like, hey guys, your colleagues, this is a campaign we ran over the last 3 months, and we applied, like, we created a campaign, for example, using this data, and then we measured using that data, and this is the result. And this campaign is better than it ever was before when we were doing things more like with gut instinct rather than data. So in itself, like, people should be convinced by the fact that working with data and doing it properly gives better results for whatever it is that you do in the company. But then again, a lot of people will come up with a lot of defenses, like, oh, but I don't know, I don't have a degree in statistics. Oh, you don't need one. Or in math, you don't need one. Or, oh, my data, I don't know where my data is. So I think it is part of the process. But even selfishly, because I mean, as humans, we do a lot of things out of selfish motives. If you can be that person in the organization that champions like using data more, and then data works for the company, you yourself will be recognized for like sparking that conversation. And then again, depending on, so I'm going a bit longer with the answer because I don't see tens of hands up anyway. But now the working with data is complex because of course, and then depending on the data, but as marketers, a lot of this data needs to follow certain rules, whether it's GDPR or anything else. So it's not that you can just like wake up one day and all of a sudden, I'm going to work with data. Do you even have the data? I mean, all the stuff we talked about, but also what are you allowed to do or not allowed to do with that data? So the transformation of becoming a data-driven organization is a big task. But funnily enough, I was actually having lunch earlier with a partner whose office are just across the street, and we were reminiscing of when the cloud didn't exist. And then companies would not even, like especially banks and like that, they wouldn't even consider storing their data in the cloud because it's crazy, it's dangerous, and it's not now. Fast forward a few years, like everybody's using the cloud now. People understand the opportunity, and that was something that's an idea whose time has come. And I think working more with data is another idea which has come to fruition to some extent, and then I'll shut up, I promise, because I'm going very long here and very on a tangent. But like as a business, unless you're like a monopoly or in a very, very strong competitive position, if you're not leveraging data, you will slowly fade away. You will lose the competitive edge. It's as simple as this. And maybe in some cases it doesn't only apply to marketing, but again, look at marketing. There are so many ways of and so many companies trying to get people's attention that now you need to be like really clever just to cut through the noise and get a little bit of that attention. So all these decisions must be data driven.
My name is Noemi and I am a data analyst, and my question is, we all, I hope, understand the importance of data quality. The problem, at least in my company, is that there is always something else to do, like a new project, a new report, something that has a money impact, short term, that always is better than the long-term impact of the data quality. So what would be your advice to convince my boss that data quality actually matters and to look more at long term than short term? Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm happy to talk after as well if you want, and then maybe share with you some of the thoughts around that, again, that Venn diagram I refer to, like people, culture, and technology. This sounds like a situation of culture, like data culture that is not there just yet. And I earlier said that these kind of things need to come from the top. But maybe there is another way. Like if the top says, no, look, we're too busy and we got like targets to hit this Q4, whatever, we'll think about this next quarter, then maybe it could be seen as I don't know, recently a client of ours did a hackathon for their like data science team to come up with some novel situations, and did it over a weekend. So I'm not advocating taking your weekend to do work, but like maybe there is an opportunity, again, to also to put yourself in a position of shining, of starting this from the bottom up. Like try to do something that then can be proven, like, look, now that we've invested in data quality, look at the difference of what we can achieve. Or like, look how wrong we were in the past when the data actually we thought was correct. It wasn't. So we got lucky at not like making the wrong decisions, losing revenues, clients, and whatever.
Final question here.
Hi, my name is Julia. I'm mobile marketing consultant at Dr. 60. And I have a question about something that I don't think you mentioned, is the problem that is confirmation bias. How do you avoid that? Because I can imagine people trying to shift the data to fit their assumptions is also a big problem.
Yeah, and confirmation bias, which I would say started by Daniel Kahneman, one of my heroes. And if it wasn't started by him, I just made a fool of myself. But anyway, now I think it's so. I wouldn't say it's related to the data quality topic, because the data quality is a different thing. Like, again, maybe it goes back to the people, culture, and technology conversation. Like, there's a famous quote, actually I don't know who the quote is from, but a colleague of mine used it once, is torture the data and it will confess to anything. So if you're clever enough and you have data that is malleable enough, you can prove pretty much anything you want. So yeah, that's a whole topic in itself. But one thing I would say, again, to bring it closer to what I know and to this topic, is that if you are certain that the data you're working with is the right data, is high quality data, then at least you remove one element of doubt when you look at the data. Like, has the person who came up with this analysis been massaging the data to prove whatever point they wanted to prove? So at least there's one thing, is okay, the data is the right data. Now let's try and see, could it have been manipulated to prove a point that is not necessarily, or that is just what we want to hear ourselves? And yeah, it's a difficult one. But
Great.
thank
Let's
you.
give it up, everybody, for Fabio.
Thank you very much.